these political what's the word I'm looking for? Demands start to become sort of moral or religious obligations, or they're presented as such, right? They're presented, even though you might say like, well, maybe there's biblical and theological debate to be had over each of these particular topics, but especially during COVID or after the George Floyd killing, things were presented at either you are on board with this particular take on a hot button political / moral issue, or you're sort of outside, like non salus outside the church. Like, you're sort of outside orthodoxy, or you're outside of the good graces of God and the church. And I think that, in my view, that was most poignant, I think, with regards to COVID, right? Where we were getting the types of things like, if you don't get the vaccinations, you are not following Jesus's command to love your neighbor as yourself. It's like, wait a second. And some of us, as in your own family, and positive with me, some of us had some serious issues with vaccines. Once we got them.
Wearing the mask. I mean,
mask.
people seriously saying, if you don't just quietly go along with every bit of this protocol, how can you really consider yourself pro-life? And I'm so shocked and appalled to see pro-lifers who aren't willing to do this. It's like, excuse me, where is this coming from? And we can get into this a little more if we want to touch on COVID specifically, but something powerful that Meg does in the COVID chapter, she tells this story about a church that decided to stay open and defy regulations. And a woman found the church who was very bossed and on drugs, and really needed a Christian community to come around her and help her. And she connected with that church in that time frame, and they were able to help her. And then she got baptized, and I mean, they saved her life essentially. And Meg says, wasn't that woman also our neighbor? And men and women like her, they were also our neighbors. And all of this sort of vicious moralizing was ignoring that entire side of the debate, and ignoring all of these very substantive counter considerations, including considerations of neighbor love, if we want to talk about neighbor love. And so I think that was very effectively done.
Yeah, Logan, did you want to jump
I think
in?
what both of you guys are, everyone's bringing up, and I think this is what was sort of like such like a profound aspect of Megan's book, and I think it has been overlooked broadly. I think our side has picked up on it, and I think this is why Megan writes the book in the beginning, but there is an asymmetry between like how these views are being sort of promulgated. Like you said, like the COVID is like, you love your neighbor. That's not the controversy. They'll say to love your neighbor means to do this specific action, that specific action, if it's masks or vaccines or shelter in place. But when you say, should I help my neighbor who is in crippling depression and needs to talk to someone? And I did raise that question a few times, even with the church I was at the time. And it was a foregone conclusion that you could not say something like that. Because obviously we all have to agree that's not loving your neighbor. Or when Roe versus Wade, came down and it was overturned. The celebration, that was perhaps the most shocking part of the entire episode, was the lack of celebration and almost mourning, like, now we have all these women who we have to take care of now, which I'm still like, if we're loving your neighbor, wouldn't this not be a continuation of the, step-by-step way of having victory? Or she uses the examples of the BLM stuff, where it was like, if we want to talk about helping, our Black neighbor, does it only mean hiring people from the top down into a pastoral position, despite what his qualifications may or may not be? Or is it, questions about the family relations and societal things? Like it's the foregone conclusions that seem to be all running one direction. Right. And what Megan opened up with is like, okay, maybe the person in the pew doesn't understand the particular threads of how like these ideas are sort of falling in line and sort of having these sort of broad patterns, but they just see like, I'm just getting the wrong message every single time, and I don't know why, and I don't know where it's coming from, I don't know where it leads to. And what she says, like, well, we can take that big picture. She does such a good job being able to say, hey, like, we're all seeing this, and now I'm going to be the one that says, hey, let's put all these stories together so we can at least start the conversation. And I think this is why everyone gets so upset on the left. Finally, someone did this. Someone said, hey, we need to really have a touchstone of where we can start and have this discussion about personal experience.
Right. And I mean, I think what's embarrassing for the sort of class of evangelical, if you will, that she's calling out here is across all of these issues, the Black Lives Matter stuff, race stuff, the gay stuff, sexual abuse stuff, like whatever the issue was, she's exposing a sort of consistent pattern of insecurities and people defaulting or deferring to self-proclaimed expert voices who were going to come in. It's like, okay, we're going to teach you how to properly listen to and care for, fill in the blank with whoever the mascot group is, the
Right.
vulnerable minority, whatever. And if you want to be considered good, thoughtful, caring, decent evangelical people, you're going to listen to us. And this handful of leaders said, okay, we'll listen to you. We'll be quiet now. Like, shush, Jamar Tisby is speaking, like whoever the guy is, right? And then it just turned out to be a slow motion disaster, which is why some of this stuff gets, or Francis Collins with COVID, right? He's your evangelical elite. Everyone listen to him. And then when this stuff crashes and burns, it kind of gets swept under the rug. And then that's what she's insisting on pointing out. It's like, okay, there was way too much insecurity, way too much haste to try to defer to these people when you need to find your own spine. You guys need to find your own confidence as shepherds, as pastors of the word, to say, actually, we think we can discern pretty well for ourselves what to do here. We don't actually need to outsource this to the experts, capital E.